Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining us for February's Next Generation Assessments meeting. We're very excited to have you all here this afternoon. My name is Stephanie Snyder. I am the Deputy Director of Assessments at Aussie, and I'm joined by several members of our team who we'll introduce in a few minutes. Do just want to note that we will be recording today's session and it'll be posted on our website within the next couple of days. As you're coming in, please mute your microphone and turn off video if you're not speaking. We are expecting quite a crowd, so I want to make sure that we have enough bandwidth to support good network quality. There is a sign-in sheet that Michael has just dropped into the chat. Please feel free to sign in at any point. And then there's also a link with meeting resources, and that includes this slide presentation, as well as a number of documents that we've published over the last several months to help folks get ready for administration. There is one document in particular, I think it's called Helpful Links, and it's a document that attempts to kind of put all of the resources that we'll be sharing throughout today's presentation into one document. So the links that folks are going through this afternoon for their individual assessments are also on that document in the resource folder. With that, just a brief overview of our agenda this afternoon. We'll give a brief introduction about statewide assessments in DC, and then have a number of policy updates and reminders for folks as we are getting into spring 22 assessment administration season. And then we'll have some assessment specific preparation and guidance steps because this is our final meeting before the end of the spring 2022 assessment administration window. We usually meet every other month, but we do not hold an April meeting due to the volume of testing that's happening at that time. So this is the purpose of this meeting really is to go over final preparation steps and also talk about where you can get support during administration if you have questions or need assistance. And we'll talk about supports that we can provide both now while we're preparing for administration, but also during and after administration is needed. So just wanted to start with the mission of Aussie's Office of Assessments. And we start every meeting with this, but just wanted to reiterate that our office's mission is to, in partnership with key stakeholders such as yourself, create a comprehensive educational assessment program that accurately measures student performance, produces actionable data, and provides tools, guidance, and training to empower LEAs to make decisions, to meet the needs of all learners and make informed decisions. So that's something that we at the Asi Assessment team really hold dear. We want to make sure that the assessments are of use to our stakeholders in making the critical decisions that you need to make for your learners. I'm going to now turn it over to members of our team to introduce themselves. You may see a couple of new names. We've had a couple of new folks join our team since the last meeting, which was in December. So I will turn it over to Danielle to introduce herself, and then team, you can jump in.
Good afternoon, everyone. Again, Danielle Branson, the Director of Assessments. It's really wonderful to speak with you today. Looking forward to our discussion.
Good afternoon, everybody. I'm Chelsea Charlin. I am the Assessment Specialist for Science here at Aussie. I'm looking forward to discussing everything with everybody today.
All right, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Michael Craig. I serve as the Assessment Specialist for Special Populations at Aussie. I'm glad to be here with everyone today.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Lavinia Ringgold, and I am the Assessment Specialist for Test Security. I'm glad to see most of you here.
And Shandy, do you want to hop in and introduce yourself as well?
Sure. Hi, everyone. I'm Shandy Wagner. I'm a data analysis manager in the Office of Research and Reporting, and I work with a lot of our access data.
Great. Thank you, team. Just as a reminder, I'm sure you've all seen this slide several times throughout the years, but just wanted to remind folks of the statewide assessments that are offered in the District of Columbia. We have NAEP, the National Assessment of Educational Progress, which is actually going on right now. And many thanks to those schools that are participating. I know there's a lot of preparation steps, and we are glad to have your participation. Next up is Wida Access for ELLs, which administration begins on Monday and goes, we'll talk about Windows in a couple of minutes. The PARC assessment is our general education assessment in ELA and math. MSAA, the multi-state alternate assessment, is our alternate assessment in ELA and math. DC Science is our general education assessment in science, and then Dynamic Learning Maps is our alternate assessment in
Cover letter.
science.
Oh, for QSR.
As I mentioned, testing windows, NAEP testing has started, and that window goes through March 4th. Access begins on Monday, and I know that we do have a handful of schools who are preparing to open their testing on Monday. So we are here to support you if there are any last minute issues that come up, but we are excited to really kick off the assessment administration season for 2022. MSA and DLM will be administered from March 14th through April 29th, and then PARC and DC Science will be administered April 4th through May 27th, though the window for students taking paper-based assessments does close a week earlier than that on May 20th.
Right punctuation, things like that.
This graphic may also be familiar to folks. It is the annual assessment coordination timeline and really lays out the steps and actions that are needed to prepare for assessment administration throughout the year. We are at this point, a lot of these steps are happening simultaneously, and a lot of them also will be discussing this afternoon during our meeting. But we're really at the point where LEAs are in the thick of creating school test security plans and assigning staff to participate as authorized personnel in the assessment administration, and creating test schedules and test sessions and setting up and making sure that everything is ready to go. So this document is available on our website, but is just kind of meant to be a high-level guide of the steps that are needed for assessment administration. This document is also available on our website, and is just a kind of a different view to understand what actions are happening and kind of the high-level time frame that they're happening in for each of the different assessment programs. We have put MSA and DLM together in one block here, and then PARC and DC Science is also in one block. And then there's also test security has its own kind of buckets on this document as well to highlight the various test security steps that are happening throughout the assessment administration season. One website that I think we've highlighted in previous meetings, but is worth reiterating, is the Aussie Test Coordinator Resources webpage. It's on Aussie's website. We've created it to be basically a one-stop shop for test coordination resources. There's the test administration timeline that we just went over, and testing windows are posted there, as well as roles and responsibilities of LEA assessment managers and non-public school test coordinators. There's customer support information, which we will be updating given our new team members who are on board now. So be on the lookout for an updated version of that. And then that site is also where we're posting the trainings and recordings of those trainings that we've given throughout December and January and February, and also has links to several important documents and resources by assessment program. So that webpage is really a good first stop for test coordinators who are looking for guidance on what steps they need to be taking to prepare for administration. With this, I'm going to take a step back and turn it over to some other folks to go over some assessment policy updates and reminders.
Great, thanks, Stephanie. So we wanted to spend a little bit of time this afternoon reminding you of some of the foundational policy and guidance documents that we have available for statewide testing this year, this 2021-22 school year. These are not new, so just reminders of what's publicly available, particularly for new individuals who are joining for the first time this year. These are the Statewide Assessments Participation and Performance Policy document that talks about a reminder of all of our required assessments, required grades and courses, how students are expected to participate, how participation calculations are done, as well as how performance calculations are done. It also handles some of the unique pathways for students. So if there is anyone new joining your team who needs a briefing on general policy, this is the place to go. Those of you who are in the thick of preparing for our test security requirements, developing your school test security plans, and getting your trainings underway, you are well aware that we have also posted the test security guidelines and supporting resources. Those are available on OSSE's website, again, providing a comprehensive overview of the policy landscape for test security this year. Not a lot of changes from previous years, but helpful for, again, new individuals who want to get a full briefing. We also have our testing accommodations guides posted, our accessibility guides, our guides for accommodations for students with disabilities, as well as our accommodations guides for our English learners. Those are all posted, and I know you have been using those for your registration. So we wanted to remind folks that these are available all on our website and that you should be sharing them with your teams as appropriate. Next slide. So all reminders for this section, but wanted to remind this group while we're here together about the in-person testing requirement for school year 2022. During this year, it's expected that all students enrolled in courses with required assessments are participating in in-person testing. That is, of course, unless there is an approved medical exemption specific to testing. This is separate from the distance learning exemption that folks may have for instruction. There has to be an emergency medical condition signed by a physician and submitted through the medical exemption form to OSSE. Those are due as soon as you have them available, but they must be submitted and then submitted 10 days after the last day of the statewide testing window for your school or LEA. We anticipate this to be a relatively small number, as they have been in previous years. We will be working with LEAs, and we have been working with LEAs to determine reasonable accommodations for students to test in person safely, particularly those who are in virtual learning programs. And we have worked with LEAs in a number of different. Sorry, thank you for putting yourself on mute. So a number of different possible pathways to test these students safely. One of those is testing at an alternate school site, which requires some advanced setup at the OSSE level. So please do reach out to us if you do need something like that, where you're testing at an alternate site, testing on an alternate day, testing an alternate time of day. So if you have not yet created a protocol for testing your students in person safely who are in a distance learning posture, please reach out to us for support. We are happy to help you with that. And you will be including that as part of your school test security plan. So if you already have your plan in place, you don't need help. You just note that in your school test security plan. Next slide, please. So we wanted to call to your attention something separate from in-person testing and testing this year, our request with the U.S. Department of Education for an extension to our existing advanced mathematics waiver. So right now in ESSA, in the Every Student Succeeds Act, students in grade 8 are permitted to take an advanced high school math assessment that best matches their instructional course. However, that is only applicable for grade 8 students. Currently, we know that there are students in grade 7 who are taking mathematics courses more advanced than what's assessed on the grade 7 math test. So we reached out for and received approval from the U.S. Department of Education for a waiver so our students in grade 7 could participate in advanced mathematics assessments, particularly Algebra 1. This waiver was in place from 2018-19 to 2020-21, and we are now requesting an extension to this waiver, and that would be through 23-24. We are asking for your public comment. Your letters, your emails are very helpful in our submission to the Department of Education. We are asking for your public comment to ossie.assessment@dc.gov by March 1st, 2022. And this would be, again, a extension of our currently existing policy. Wanted to pause to see if anyone had a question about the advanced mathematics waiver before we move on to the EL exit criteria. Yes, Jess, I saw your email come through. It does not. So the U.S. and sorry, I'll read it for everyone. Is the question is, sorry, we lost it in the chat. The question is, does a higher level math for grade 7 include grade 8 test or only high school courses? It only includes advanced high school mathematics courses. The grade-based tests must be taken in the grade that they are that they match the enrolled grade. So for these students in grade 7, this is for students who are taking Algebra 1. If a student is taking some of the standards that are covered in grade 8, they are still required to take the grade 7 assessment. That's considered more of a census assessment at that point. Grade levels are kind of full enrolled grade. And that's per the U.S. Department of Education requirements. Good question. Any other questions? And thank you in advance for your feedback. We really appreciate any public comments we receive. Okay, now we can transition to the EL exit criteria.
Hey everyone, we can go to the next slide. Thank you. So wanted to let you all know that we have had a policy change after looking at a lot of our data over several years, as well as some national data and research on English learners, that we are changing the exit criteria for students at which they exit EL status into monitored status. Currently, a student must score a 5.0 or higher on the Access for ELL's assessment in order to exit EL status. We are changing that to a 4.5 for students in grades 1st grade through 12th grade. The exit criteria will not change for kindergartners. And that is because the assessment didn't significantly change for kindergartners in 16-17 in the way that it did for students in grades 1 through 12. Want to emphasize that we are not lowering the bar. We are re-examining what our policy should be after Wida changed the assessment in 2016-17. They reset some standards. As we looked at our data, we had very few students exiting, but they were still being very successful on other assessments, such as reading language arts on the PARCC assessment. So in terms of timing, this will take place based on this year's Access assessment scores, which means it will affect students' EL statuses the following school year, in school year 22-23. We will also be making corollary changes to our access growth criteria for the STAR framework down the road. So definitely stay tuned for changes to the methodology there, but that will definitely take place and be incorporated into the access growth criteria. And then we can go to the next slide. Just want to talk a little bit more about the impetus for why we made this change. And as you can see on the graph on the right, we used to have about 20% of our students exit as proficient on the English language arts, or sorry, the English language proficiency assessment or Access each year. In 2016-17, that dropped significantly, where we're at about 5% of students exiting now. The exit criteria change, if scores look similar to what they did in the past, would mean that we would end up with about 12% of students exiting each year. Of course, we know that a couple of years of incomplete access testing, as well as a couple of years of interrupted in-person learning may mean some differences for a while, but most likely it will average out to about 12% in the future. We looked at the benefits for students of staying in EL status and having those related services or exiting. And when we looked at ELs in DC who had a score of 4.5 or higher on Access, they scored really well and on par with their native English speaking peers, which told us that they were doing well enough that they could succeed outside of additional English language services. We also looked at a lot of academic research that shows that students who are at similar proficiency levels as other students and are receiving services are less likely to have access to higher education and some of those AP courses and things that get them ready for college and next steps in life. So we definitely don't want to hinder students. We want to make sure that they're getting services when they need them, but not getting additional services when they don't need them and that they're no longer beneficial for them. We also want to flag that, as always, has been our policy. If an LEA determines that a student really needs to be re-entered as an English learner after exiting as proficient, an LEA can do that. They would just need to go through the status management, kind of like an OST ticket, and submit that change with the impetus for why the LEA is re-entering the student as an English learner. And so that is a backstop if a student, exits on a 5, whether it's a 5.0 or a 4.5, whatever score they exit on, they can be re-entered and continue to be considered an English learner on an individual student level basis. So I wanted to let you all know, I don't know if there are any questions. I can check the chat here. I don't see any pertaining to Access, but if you do have questions, feel free to follow up. So the question that I do see, can students who are level 4.5 to 4.9 still receive accommodations as an English learner? I want to refer to the assessment team here to double check, but I believe no. If currently monitored students can receive those services, then yes, they could receive those types of accommodations. But accommodations that are specific to current English learners, no, they would be considered monitored students, regardless of if they exited with a 4.5 or with a 5.0.
Yep, Shandy, just co-signing what you said. The students would be in monitor status the next year, and they would only be eligible for those small number of accommodations that are appropriate for students in monitor status, things like extended time. I think there's one other, but yeah.
Yeah. Thank you for that confirmation. I see another question about students. Are students who do not receive services still expected to take access? The answer to that is yes. If they are identified as an English learner in OSSE's data system, which comes from a variety of logic based on what LEAs have told us and student access scores, even if a student is not receiving services, maybe the parent waived services, they are still required to take access until they score proficient on access, which starting this year will be a 4.5 or higher. I also want to note as well, this is not retroactive. If a student scored a 4.5 3 years ago, we're not putting them in monitored status. It is only starting with this year's assessment and moving forward. So that additional note as well. Okay, I don't see any other questions, so I will hand it back over to you all. Thanks so much.
Thank you, Chandy. And if folks do have additional questions about the change to the exit criteria, can they reach out to you, Chandy?
Yes, absolutely. And I see a question in the chat, so I'll just answer it in the chat as well.
Great, thank you. And at this point, I'm actually going to turn it over to Lavinia for some reminders on test security preparations that are happening right now. So Lavinia, I'll turn it to you.
Okay. Next slide, please. Okay, this is in reference to the test security training modules and quiz. We need to make sure that your LEA test integrity coordinators are going through those training modules and that they pass the quiz with a score of at least 80%. The link to that is there in the presentation. And you must go through all of the modules in order to find the actual quiz. Please make sure you're doing that before you develop and submit your test security plans. The following individuals here are specific to the actual assessment about who should be taking that quiz and viewing those training modules. If you are an LEA test integrity coordinator, it means you have other schools underneath you, then you are the person who will take it on behalf of all of those schools. And when we see that, when we're reviewing your test security plans, we can move you forward for a review that hopefully will get you approved once we view that. Any questions at all about the test security training modules and quiz? Okay, thank you. Next slide, please. Every school, including our non-public schools, are required to administer the statewide assessments, and you must complete and submit that school test security plan prior to the start of your school's testing window. The reason we require that you do that before you begin testing is getting our approval so that we can make sure if there's anything we need you to adjust or clarify, it's done in advance of the window actually beginning. This school test security plan is our official communication, is your official school communication with Aussie about how you are administering those statewide assessments. And we need you to get that to us 15 days prior to the first day of testing. That way it gives us an opportunity to review it, and we have hundreds to review. Send it back to you if there are any revisions, and then you get those revisions back to us, then we take a look at it again and make sure that we are getting this ready, approved and ready for you to begin testing when the date that you have scheduled to begin your testing. So please get that to us 15 days in advance. If there's something going on, reach out to me and we'll see what we can do. But that 15-day business days is the most optimal time of giving us a chance and you a chance to get it approved. I see a question in chat says, do we have to check back on the status or will we be notified? If you should get an alert once we've approved it in the QuickBase. If you have received one from me that said you need to do revisions and you submitted those revisions and you did not get an alert back saying that you've been approved or you need additional revisions, please shoot me an email and we'll take a look. Okay. And Melissa, you said there wasn't a notification for yours, but we are working on it. And what school are you at, Melissa?
Oh, that was someone referring to me. I guess it was Dominique Coot.
Okay. Okay, so Dominique, you're saying that you didn't get a notification, but they're working on it?
Yeah, I'm here. We at Aussie did work on getting the QuickBase app to send out notifications when the status changes on those school test security plans. I believe they should be working now.
Okay.
So if you find that you're still not getting notifications, please do reach out to us so that we can double check those that setup one more time. But I believe that notifications should be working now.
Yes. Okay. Thank you for that. Next slide, please. I have a question here. Bethany, let's see, you requested access to QuickBase app. What school are you at, Bethany? Okay, I'll take a look. Yeah, I'm the one who will give you access to QuickBase. If you sent an email, if you clicked on the alert in the app, it eventually make its way to me. Okay. School test security plan resources. Here are some resources. You'll find these in QuickBase. The test security plan application gives you some really good information on how to complete and submit your plans. So if there is a problem, just simply email me and I can walk you through it or help you out. There is information about the test security and incident forms website. One of the things that really helps you do these plans is there's something called an exemplar. If you use that, it kind of gives you, it will give you an idea of the response that we're asking for each of those sections. So do not hesitate to refer to that to give you some guidance. Any questions? I see Danielle's responding to some questions in the chat.
Yeah, I think one question I do want to give voice to that did come up in the chat was regarding non-public schools and whether they are required to submit school test security plans. So some non-publics serve students from more than one DC LEA. And I believe their question was, do they need to submit a plan for each LEA or just one for the school? And Danielle did answer, all schools are required to have individual school test security plans. So it is a school-based plan. So if you are serving students from multiple LEAs, you're just required to submit one plan for the school. I hope that answered the question.
Okay, thank you for that. Good question. Any other questions? I think we're caught up in the chat. Next slide. Is that my slide also? Okay, so assessment monitoring. This is the fun part. We are responsible for monitoring during the assessments that are being administered in the schools. And we're going to be doing monitoring in person beginning in March. So the first one up is going to be Access and All Access. We're going to put some checklists out for the schools to view. They'll be posted with the test security and incident forms. We have pretty much completed identifying the schools that we're going to be monitoring. It's going to be our assessment team members and our EL working group members. Because we are essential personnel, we are allowed and authorized, if you will, to come into your school building to conduct this monitoring. Now, we'll be reaching out to the LEA to let them know which schools we have chosen. And we have some forms that we're going to ask them to complete prior to us coming out. just so that we are in compliance with COVID protocols from OSSE, as well as COVID protocols that you may have in your school building. Any questions about upcoming monitoring? So we're going to start with access and all access, and that's in a few short weeks. Next slide, please. I just mentioned that, but I'll go over it. We have worked with our health and wellness division, and we're going to follow all OSSE protocols when we come in to do monitoring. So our staff are going to be wearing, our monitors are going to be wearing masks. And if your school requires something additional, you'll be able to let us you'll be able to notify us of that in the form that we'll be sending out when we reach out to you, to your LEAs. And as you can see, we're going to be fully vaccinated and a booster where applicable. And we're wearing our K95 and KN95 mask based on CDC recommendations. And when our folks come in, they're also going to maintain, continue to maintain social distancing. And there's going to be minimal, if any, communication when they are in the testing environment. Most of their conversation will be with the school test coordinator before they come into your actual testing environment. Okay, I don't see any additional questions in the chat. If so, please reach out to me. And looking forward to seeing you when we come in and do monitoring.
Thank you, Lavinia. And I know the Asi Assessment Monitoring piece has been one that we've been discussing over the last several months. And we have just determined that it will be in person, as Lavinia noted, and we will be notifying LEA assessment managers of the schools that have been selected in their LEA for monitoring. As Lavinia noted, access will come first, but then we'll roll into the other assessment programs as well throughout the administration season. So do expect that LEAs will receive notification of the schools that have been selected, but we will not be providing exact dates of monitoring, just advising you that monitors will be coming into the schools at some point in the planned testing window. With that, if there are other questions, please do feel free to drop them in the chat, but I'm going to move us along to some assessment-specific preparation and administration guidance. So as I mentioned, this is our final meeting before the end of the testing window, so wanted to make sure that you all are aware of the steps that you need to be taking in this moment to prepare for each assessment program, and then also how you can receive support in preparing and in administering those assessments. So I'm going to first turn it over to Danielle to talk about NAEP, which, as we mentioned, has been going on for a couple of weeks, but still has a few more weeks left in its window.
Thanks, Stephanie. Next slide. So thank you to everyone who is participating in NAEP this year for our first statewide assessment of the year in a bit of time. So thank you all for your preparation, for your partnership with the NAEP field staff as we embark on this new testing season. As Stephanie mentioned, the window opened on January 24th and officially closes on March 4th. I want to reiterate that all students identified in the sample and eligible to test are expected to participate in NAEP testing. It's really important that we have high participation rates, that we are including as many students as possible, and ensuring that we follow those inclusion guidelines for our students with disabilities and our English learners to ensure we have data that are representative of our community. This is a main NAEP year, so we will be receiving not only our national data, but our state data, our DC level data, as well as our TUDA DCPS data. So high participation is critical to having us have information that is representative of our population. We wanted to flag, and some of you know this already because we've been working closely with your teams, that because of a need for additional flexibility on the NAEP field staff side, some schools have been asked to schedule NAEP testing through the end of March. So while our window officially closes on March 4th, there are some schools that will be testing throughout the end of March to ensure we can get all of our students tested. Your school test coordinators are working directly with the NAEP assessment coordinators, we call them our field staff, on all of the operational planning and during testing support, walking through all of those pre-assessment activities and making sure everyone is prepared for testing. We want to highlight that if your LEA assessment managers, all of you, can reach out directly to our DC NAEP field staff manager if you need to receive additional support from NAEP. Please feel free, and please, we encourage you to CC us so we are aware and can help escalate and support you if needed. But Michelle Curian Garcia, the email listed here, is our NAEP field staff manager and has been having one-on-ones with different LEAs to support them. And I think they've been really helpful. So we do really encourage you to reach out if you need additional support. Next slide. So most of you have finished all of your preparations as we're well underway with NAEP testing, but some of you are testing a little bit later in the window and may still be working on some of your pre-assessment tasks. So wanted to highlight them here. There are 6 full tasks that are required prior to testing and prior to your pre-assessment review call with your assigned field staff coordinator. Those are reviewing your demographics, assigning your accommodations, really important, notifying parents and guardians, and uploading the notification statements. Very important. If those are not updated, that we cannot begin testing. Focusing on the planning for assessment tasks, encouraging participation, making sure you're noting all those important inclusion policies, and then updating your current roster. In the MyNAEP system, there are modules and supports for each of these pieces of the pre-assessment activities, so you're able to get all the support you need in filling out each of these. But you're also welcome to reach out to your field staff coordinator who can help you with each of these tasks. During your pre-assessment review call, they will help walk through each of these with you, so you're fully prepared. And any escalation needs, feel free to reach out to us at Aussie so we can help support you. You're encouraged as an LEA, part of your responsibility is monitoring your school's progress using your MyNAEP registration ID, making sure that your school coordinators are fully engaged in their preparation, that they're meeting all their deadlines, and that they're ready for testing. Next slide. We've shared this a couple times, but as we are embarking on a full May NAEP year, it's a good opportunity to remind people of what NAEP is, why we do it, why it's so important, and some of our policies surrounding NAEP administration. So we've linked some of these high-level resources for you to share with your teams and share with others that might be interested. And please reach out to us if any of you have any questions. Now I'll turn it over to Mike to talk about access.
All right, thanks so much, Danielle. Next slide, please. All right, so as mentioned earlier, our access window for the 2021-22 school year opens next week on February 14th and closes March 25th. So all students that have been identified as an English learner and receiving EL services must complete access testing. So in order to prepare for the test administration, our TCs and TAs should complete the following steps before administering the assessment. So make sure that you complete the required online training in the Wida Secure portal. TAs must pass the final quiz with an 80% or higher, but TCs do not have to do so. So again, make sure you complete the training, but TAs must pass the final test with 80% or higher. Store all secure materials in a secure location in your school buildings. Materials were delivered on the 7th of this week. And throughout the week. So hopefully all schools have received their materials thus far. Set up your testing window in the Wida AMS system. Our test coordinators now have access to Wida AMS and they should begin setting up their test sessions. Also make sure you submit your test security plan through the QuickBase application, as Lavinia mentioned earlier. That must be done 15 days prior to the beginning of your testing in your school. And make sure you download All Access, the online and paper checklist from the DC State page on the Wida site. These checklists are a great resource for our test coordinators and test administrators. They walk you through step-by-step instructions on how to best prepare for the administration. Next slide.
Hey, Mike, there's one question in the chat asking what is meant by setup testing window in AMS.
Sure. So when the pre-ID file is submitted to DRC, which is the testing vendor, they submit all the students and group them in generic testing sessions. So the test coordinator is responsible for creating their own testing sessions in the Wida AMS platform that works best for your school. So if you're going to group your students by a class or group your students by grade levels, those are your testing sessions. So you set up your how you are testing your students. Also, so just some additional guidance on preparation. These are some quick resources that our test coordinators and test administrators can download for support before beginning the administration. You have your quick start guide, that is available on the Wida website. You have the assessment training, which is required. That is also in the Wida AMS site. You have your Access for Ells test coordinator manual, your Access for Ells test administrator manual, and your accessibility and accommodations manuals. So definitely make sure you download all of these resources and keep them handy throughout the administration, particularly for our test coordinators, your district TC manuals, and our test administrators, your TAM. Finally, we have some just resources and support for our TCs and TAs during administration. So if you have questions about secure materials, make sure you contact your LEA test coordinator. For technology issues, contact DRC customer support. For test security concerns, you can reach out to Aussie Assessment, or you can reach out to Lavinia. And then for general test administration, you can reach out to Aussie Assessment. All right, so switching gears, we are going to talk about MSAA. All right, so for this school year, the MSAA testing window opens on March 14th and closes on April 29th. All students deemed eligible by Aussie for alternate assessment participation in grades 3 through 8, 11, and C3 must participate in testing. C3 is for a specific LEA that uses that code for our certificate track students. LEA, our TCs will receive their login credentials for MSAA by February 25th. So I just want to reiterate that a lot of TCs have been reaching out to me asking about login credentials for MSAA. They have not been created yet. They have not been generated. You will receive an email from Cognia, which is the testing vendor, no later than February 25th for your login credentials. LEA test coordinators are responsible for creating their school test coordinator accounts and their test administrator accounts. Or you can set it up in any manner that you feel is best for your LEA, but your LEA in your schools, but your LEA test coordinator is responsible for creating the TC accounts. Prior to administering the assessment, the training modules will become available in the MSAA platform by February 28th. So you receive your account on February 25th. All training modules will be available on February 28th in the MSAA platform. TAs must review all modules and pass the quiz with 80% or higher. TCs must view the modules but do not have to complete the final quiz. Next slide. TCs and TAs should complete the following steps in order to prepare for the administration. Download all the required materials from the MSAA platform. Your required materials include the test administration manual, the directions for test administration, and the user guides for the TCs and TAs. These are also referred to as a TAM, DTA, and the user guides. These are all your three main resources that you will use during testing. Remember that MSAA is an online assessment. You do not have to print any materials. Everything is available online unless your student requires the assessment to be printed, and you can print it from the MSAA testing site. Make sure you download your TC and TA checklist. So similar to Access, these checklists walk you through step-by-step instructions in order to prepare for the test administration season. Also, like I mentioned, make sure you review your training modules. These are required before administering the assessment, and complete the before testing task in the MSAA system. So some additional support for administration. You can, if you have questions about secure materials, make sure you contact your LEA test coordinator. Technical support with the testing platform, reach out to MSAA Service Center. For test security concerns, again, Aussie.assessment.gov. And if you have general test administration questions, also reach out to Aussie.assessment. All right, so we're gonna go to the chat to see if there are any questions about MSAA or Access. All right, so I see a question, how do you find out if any students fall into the MSAA category? So these students have been identified by Aussie through the alternate assessment eligibility process in the QuickBase application. If you have specific questions about that process, reach out to me directly. You can email me at michael.craig@dc.gov because that I can look into that for your LEA. Here's a question about Access. We access test administrators to complete the online training. Yes, so the online training is in the Wida AMS system to complete the Access testing. All right, so now I will turn it over to Chelsea for DLM and science.
Sorry, Mike, before
Thanks,
you,
Mike. I was gonna say there's one more question.
there's
before
one more
you
question.
go.
If you're planning on using the generic test sessions that were created in AMS by DRC, is there any other action that LEAs need to take?
No, you don't need to take additional actions if the testing sites that the generic testing session, excuse me, that DRC created are fine with your school, then there's no additional steps you need to take.
Great, and just a clarification of the TA training, Dominique. I think you're correct that the Access TA training is in the
Wida
Wida
Secure Portal.
Yeah.
Yeah, excuse me
not
if I
AMS.
misspoke. Yes, sir, it's in the Wida Secure Portal.
All right, apologies, Chelsea. Take it away.
Yeah, of course. Again, my name is Chelsea Charlin. I run the science assessments for Aussie. So first we're going to talk about our DLM Alternative Assessment. So just a high overview of what the DLM is. It tests the essential elements according to the DLM specific framework for science. So this is a more broad look at our science assessments. It's not in depth as your NGSS assessments would be on the DC Science Assessment. The students who are eligible to take DLM are gone through that eligibility process through QuickBase, similar to MSAA. So if you are curious if your students are eligible for DLM, you should have been notified of their eligibility status several weeks ago when you filled it out. You can go to the next slide. So the DLM test window opens on March 14th and closes April 29th. Test administrators are set by building an LEA test coordinator. So I've gotten a lot of questions about DLM access and DLM user profiles. Please reach out to your LEA test coordinators to get additional access to our DLM portal. And that is our DLM Kite education portal. All test administrators need to complete the DLM required test administrator training. And this goes for all test administrators this year, since we've had a couple of years where we have not tested. So even if you've passed the training before, we ask that you take the refresher course and receive at least an 80% in that course in order to complete the enrollment and rostering process for your students. Aussie registered all grade 5 and 8 students that were deemed eligible to take DLM. LEAs are responsible for rostering and enrolling their high school eligible students for the biology DLM testlet. You can go on to the next slide. Before I go on to the next slide, I have a couple questions here. If we completed the modules and passed the quizzes for Maryland, does that count for DC as well? That is correct. What you're going to do is you're going to download the certificates that you got for your Maryland completion, and you can email those directly to me, and I will have my email put into the chat a little bit later. I'll be forwarding those off to the DLM support page, and that way your Maryland quizzes do count for DC, since it is the same test administrator modules. I have another question. Is there eligibility different from MSAA? or if they're eligible for MSA, are they also eligible for DLM? So it's going to be the same eligibility list for MSA as it is for DLM. So whoever was deemed eligible for MSA, we've used that same student list to determine the eligibility of DLM. So we've automatically enrolled and rostered your 5th and 8th grade students for DLM. If there's those students that you think are not eligible for DLM, you can reach out to me as well, and we can look at our eligibility list just to be sure. You're welcome. I'm going to move on. So for each student to be rostered to the person that's going to administer the testlets, we have to make sure that, again, they've taken this test administrator training and passed that 80% mark. OSSE rosters 5th and 8th grade students. Again, as a reminder, LEAs are responsible for both rostering and enrolling your high school eligible DLM students. After rostering has taken place, that is when you can complete the first contact survey as well as your personal needs and profile. That way you can determine all of the accommodations and needs for the student taking those required testlets. Can you go to the next slide? So here's just an overview of the DLM scope. A couple of these have already passed. If you're looking for DLM test coordinator training that occurred on January 12th, we do have that posted on our Asi Assessment website. Right now, we are in the rostering portion of our DLM students. So another time, Asi has rostered grade 5 and 8 students, and LEAs are responsible for rostering your high school eligible students. I will say there are a couple LEAs who have yet to include their teacher accounts in DLM, and I've reached out to those LEAs individually to remind you of the deadline of February 16th is when you should have your teacher accounts created in Kite portal, and that way they can get a roster of students attached to them. You need the roster of students in order to complete your first contact survey and your PMP. So that window starts February 16th to March. You'll notice there's no end date for your completion of those profiles because we just ask that you make sure you have those completed before your testing begins. You can go to the next slide. So it's just some ongoing activities. If you haven't already completed your test administrator training, I suggest you do that as soon as possible. You need 80% or more to be able to access your students once they are rostered to you. You want to make sure that you are submitting your school test security plans to OSSE at least 15 days before you plan on beginning testing. And again, if you have any questions about student data or communicating needs with OSSE, you could reach out to us. Next slide. Here we just have some resources. So the Kite Service Desk is an excellent resource. They are very, very well adept to deal with some problems. Just a reminder that you shouldn't be sharing any student personal information over to the Kite Service Desk. We also have our DC DLM page and some tutorials for both test coordinators and test administrators. You can go to the next slide. Before we move on to Park and DC Science, were there any other questions regarding DLM? All right. So we are going to transition into Park and DC Science. So we do group both of these together. You can see that Park is our partnership for assessment of readiness in college and careers, and we assess grades 3 through 8 and high school for Park. DC Science is our statewide science assessment aligned to the NGSS standards, and we assess grades 5, 8, and high school biology. You can go to the next slide. Here is the overview of our schedule for both Park and DC Science activities. Park and DC Science registration process began in January of this year. Each LEA is responsible for verifying registration of students grades 3 through 8 and registering high school students for these assessments. So OSSE did import students for Park and DC Science, and it's up to the LEA to determine whether or not the registration is verified. Once you've been able to do that, you can start to complete the student's personal needs profile. And this makes sure that you have all of the accommodations necessary for the student to complete the assessments. And in order to complete this registration, we do have the SRP&P Field Definitions Guide in the Park website under the support documentation. One important thing to note is if you have students in your LEA who do need paper materials in order for Park and DC Science assessment to take place, you will need to make sure that you complete your SRP&P for those individual students no later than February 16th. And if it's a non-public LEA, it's going to be February 22nd. So you want to make sure that you get the paper accommodations that you need for those students in your SRP&P uploaded into Pearson Access Next, our PAN website, so that way you can trigger shipment of those paper materials to your LEA. You can go on to the next slide, and I see we had a couple questions. How can we get access to kites? This is in reference to DLM, so you're going to email me and I can get you access to that portal for you, and Stephanie did put that email in there. I have another question. Who can I reach out to in order to gain access to Pearson Access Next as an LEA 24? Brooke, you can go ahead and email me as well, and I can get you situated with that. I have another question. I'm at a non-public. I was given access to PAN just a few weeks ago and began planning for a testing calendar, but now I no longer have access. Has my access to PAN been changed? So chances are the registration for your PAN access account is probably no longer valid through the month starting. So we do kind of cap off our registration windows for the end of last year's testing administration. So Taryn, what you're going to do is also email me, and I will go in and make sure that your account is reactivated and that you have access to PAN again. I have another question. Who should we contact if the PMP CSV file import keeps returning errors? So if you are uploading your SRP&P and you're getting a lot of error files, you can download that error report and see exactly what those error files are. It could just be incorrect information or information that's inconsistent with what PAN has identified for that student. If you have consistent errors, I would suggest trying to reach out to the member of the Aussie team, and you can do that through our office bookings, and we'll be able to provide technical assistance for your CSV PFP uploads in real time. And I can ask Stephanie to put a link to our office bookings in there when she gets a moment. I have another question. There are some discrepancies in the field definitions guide between accommodations that are available for science, but the rules say a math test must be chosen. Is it a misprint, or will PAN give an error on these accommodations? So some of the accommodations that are available for math and ELA are not available for science. So if the field definitions guide indicates that that accommodation is not available for the science assessment, it's not currently offered. So I'm not sure which accommodation you might be looking for. You also asked if the science tests were available in Spanish. They are available in Spanish. If you look on the SRP&P guide, it does say that Spanish is a accommodation that you can do for science, and that would be, I think, paper.
So just to expand on my question,
Yeah.
An example is math or science response for ELs. And it does say it's available for math or science, but then when you look at the definition or the rules, it says you have to, it will look to see that a math test has been assigned. And so we're trying to figure out if we can assign it for science, for science. And then my Spanish question, if you look at the text-to-speech options, which I know is not what I asked, but if you look at the text-to-speech options, it specifically says Spanish for math, and so I wasn't sure if those were also available for science tests.
So oh, sorry, Stephanie, you can go.
I can speak to some of that. So there is not a Spanish text-to-speech form for science. There is a Spanish online form for science and a Spanish paper form, but not a Spanish text-to-speech for science. There is Spanish text-to-speech for math. And I apologize, Dominique, what was your question before that?
Actually, can I just clarify what you said? So we can do Spanish translation online. We don't have to go for a test for science.
Correct.
But there won't be a text-to-speech option available with that.
Correct.
Okay.
But not in Spanish, no.
Okay. My other question was that if you look at the field guide definitions, the one that comes to mind is mathematics and science response, which is the scribe or speech to text. It says it's available for science, but then in the rules, it says, the student must have EL, whatever it is, but like, you
Right.
know, the different things that have to be true. And for the test, it says the test has to be a math test. That's not the only one. There are a couple, but we're just trying to figure out like if that, it says it's called for science, but it doesn't have that set up.
Yes, I believe that those are also available for science. So the field definition, the notes may be slightly out of date, and I will confirm that with Pearson. But I am pretty sure that if it says mathematics or science response, it is for both mathematics and science. So the note saying a math test must be selected, it may just be out of date.
Okay, thank you.
I'm seeing while I'm here a couple more questions in the chat. I'm still working on getting the bookings link into the chat, but just noting that there are a few office bookings for assistance prior to 216. That if you do need assistance from us, please send an email to asi.assessment@dc.gov if you're not seeing a bookings time slot that works with your schedule. The system pulls availability from our team's calendars, and it could be that there are things blocking our calendars that can be moved. So please just, if you can't find a time slot that works for you, please send us an email at asi.assessment@dc.gov, and we'll try to figure out a time that works for you to meet with someone on our team prior to the 16th if you need assistance at that point. And then another question I'm seeing is, what are considered unique accommodations? And Mike, I was going to
Sure.
say, would you like to speak to this
I
one?
can hop in there. So a unique accommodation can be something that is listed on a student's IEP that they require during in classroom assessments or on a statewide assessment. So an example of that could be if a student needs to take an assessment sitting on the floor, if a student needs a stuffed animal or something, or some type of support system while taking an assessment, if the student needs to listen to music while receiving instruction or taking assessments, those are all considered unique accommodations. So you will submit that form to OSSE, we will review and then provide you with a response if it is approved or not.
All right, I don't see any other questions, so we're going to continue. Thanks, everyone. So on the topic of accommodations, we do have some accommodations resources for Park and DC Science. So in order to complete your SRP&P, we have some additional accommodations here. So we have a accommodations guide that's been uploaded. We also have our field definitions guide, as well as the template are available for download. So these items, if you go into your PAN site, and this is also available on our PAN training site, you can go to our support documentation and see it there. And then we also have the 7th edition of the accessibility features AFA manual posted on the mydc.com Pearson support. Stephanie, I'm going to let you take over from here and see if there's anything else that you wanted to mention about our accommodations resources.
No, it's just something, reiterating something I think we've talked about previously, possibly in the December meeting, was just how we've tried to work to align all of the different accommodations related documents for ease of use for this year. So in the field definitions guide and also in the OSSE testing accommodations guide, you'll find references to the AFNA manual and to specific columns in the SRP&P, just to try to kind of triangulate that information and point folks into the right places. I understand though that the process can be confusing. So if you do need some help or have additional questions, please do feel free to reach out to our team via email or to set up a booking, and we can definitely help you troubleshoot. I see a question in the chat. Does the 7th edition linked have the 7th edition of the appendices, or does it still have the 6th edition ones? I need to double check with Pearson. I know they were making some additional updates to the appendices that I believe are due to be posted before the end of this week, but I can confirm that. So the front matter, the body of the AFNA manual is posted and is the 7th edition, and the appendices are being updated, and the 7th edition should be posted within the next few days. Will we need to complete order forms for paper tests, or is that an automatic process once you register the students? So the registration, the part of the SRPNP is to register a student either for a paper test or an online test. So if you register them for a paper test before the February 22nd deadline, then those paper tests will be shipped to your schools before the opening of the Park and DC Science window. April, I think those are due to arrive the week of March 16th, between March 16th and 21st. So if a student is registered for a paper test or an online test that requires some supplemental paper materials like a human reader script, all of those paper materials will be shipped to schools between March 16th and 21st. Another question I see, does every one of our park test administrators need to take the Aussie test security quiz if we provided the training? No, that is a good question. Test administrators are not required to complete the Aussie modules. The test security modules are required for LEA coordinators. And then our expectation is that those coordinators are providing training to school-based staff, including test administrators. So they do not need to take the quiz and pass the quiz from Aussie's modules. I will note that many LEAs do adapt the slides from the Aussie training modules, and you're more than welcome to do that as you're providing assessment training to your schools, but they do not need to take the quiz. We do need to have a record, though, of attendance at training for all folks who are serving as authorized personnel, including test administrators and proctors and technology coordinators. And that record of attendance at training goes into your school test security file. If you have specific guidelines for delivery of paper tests due to your school being a secured facility, how should you communicate those? Please send us an email at ossi.assessment@dc.gov, and we can talk through what makes sense for your school. And circling back, one more access question. How do you register new test administrators in Wida AMS and the Wida Secure Portal separately? So LEA level folks for both of those systems are able to create accounts for their school-based staff, including test administrators. So you should be able to use your login to those systems and create users in each of those systems. If you do have questions about that, please feel free to email us and we can help you kind of navigate the steps for creating test administrator accounts in each of those platforms. Mike, did you have anything to add?
No, you started covering everything.
Great. Okay. With that, I can just keep moving on through our Park and DC Science accommodations, noting that we at OSSE will be reviewing Park and DC Science accommodations once schools have submitted their SRPNP files, and just really focusing on alignment between what accommodations and documentation appears in SEDS for the students and what's listed on their IEPs, and then looking at that against the assignments made in Pearson Access next. Just wanted to remind folks that it's really important that accommodations from the IEP or 504 or EL plans are accurately documented in SRPNP and align with what the student is eligible for in SEDS. And noting that students who do not have an IEP 504 or EL plan should not be receiving accommodations on Park and DC Science, but they may receive accessibility features. Some accessibility features do need to be signaled in advance via the SRPNP. So if you do have a student who's eligible for a accessibility feature that does need to be identified in advance, that is done through the PNP process. And just noting that OSSE may contact schools that schools and LEAs where we are seeing misalignment between what's in SEDS and what students are registered for. And that will be happening hopefully in March prior to the opening of the Park UDC Science window, so those can be resolved before testing actually starts. Chelsea, I'm going to turn it back over to you to talk through unit testing times.
Sure. So Park and DC Science have very similar unit testing times, but they do have slightly different grade tests, as I've indicated before. So Park Math, we have 8 different units. Pardon me, we have our grades 3 through 8 and high school units. So you can see that each of those has 3 units, with the exception of high school only has 2 units. Those 2 units in high school do last a little bit longer than our individual units that we have for grades 3 through 8. For Park ELA, there's a similar structure here, except that the 3rd grade and 6th grade units only have 3. I will note a special thing about our 3rd and 6th grade Park ELA tests units is that one of those units is a field test unit and 2 are operational. And then the other units for our other grade levels are 2 units at 90 minutes each. And then again, we see that there is a field test unit in our ELA2 high school. And then DC Science, since again, we only test at 5, 8 in high school, there are 4 units for each of the DC Science grades, and each of those units is 45 minutes. And there's also, it's not indicated on the slide, but there is some built-in field test items for DC Science as well.
And Chelsea, I'd just like to reiterate here the grades 3, 6, and 10 for ELA or ELA2, noting that there is an additional field test unit for those grade levels for this administration, and just for you to be aware as schools are developing testing schedules to account for that additional unit in those 3 grade levels.
So we do have our Park and DC Science manuals posted on our Pearson support website. So these manuals have been posted so that you can look at those now and make sure that all of your test preparation is appropriate for what the manuals are calling for. These manuals are also shipped to each school in March with your printed materials. So you can actually opt out to getting these manuals printed and sent to you if you would prefer to print them on your own and use them right now. They include the test coordinator manual, a computer manual, a based manual, and a paper-based test administrative manual as well. You can go to the next one. So again, all of the materials will be triggered automatically to ship to your school, also based on that SRP&P paper materials that you may need for your specific accommodations. You want to make sure that when you do receive your shipment, you open it as soon as possible and make sure that everything that you need is accurate to what you've ordered. You also want to make sure that you're securing these test materials and keeping them locked away in a location prior to testing window. I will note that the manuals are not secure, since those are actually posted on our website and are available now. So you do not need to worry about keeping your test administrator or test coordinator's manuals secure. Just the specific test materials, such as your bubble sheets, paper materials, things like that, do need to be secure and in a locked location. You should be expecting to see materials for both Park and DC Science sometime in March, probably like mid-March or so. I think it's like March 15th or March 16th.
16th. Yep, March 16th
yep.
to 21st.
Perfect. Next slide. So it's important to make sure when you go into Pearson Access Next that the LEA organizational account is updated for its contact information. So we are shipping materials to the address that is provided in PAN. So before that cutoff date for paper material shipment, please make sure you go in and verify the contact information and the LEA address that should be receiving paper materials in March. You can go to the next slide. So we do have some additional training opportunities. We have a Park and DC Science Technology Coordinator training coming up next Friday at 10 a.m. We have a DC Science and Park Assessment Test Session Workshop on March 10th. There's a technical assistance during Park and DC Science testing on March 15th.
Yeah.
Do I give that off to you?
Yeah, sometimes I'm like, why Miss Susan? I'm like, sometimes I'm
And then we also have assessment closeout procedures on May 12th. So if you've missed any of our past training or workshops, all of the recordings are available on OSSE's website. And there is a link in the slides that allows you to register for any of the upcoming trainings we have relating to Park and DC Science, as well as any of our other assessments and their applicable trainings. You can go to the next one. So any sort of customer support, you can access Pearson Access Next testing support. There is a chat available after you log into PAN. There's also a 800 number. There will also be a Aussie support hotline during our Park and DC Science test administration window. Very important to note that this is for extremely urgent issues pertaining to testing administration only. So if you're experiencing any troubleshooting with your uploads of PMP or your school test security plans, that is not the number to call. This number is for very urgent test administrator issues only. You can see here it's Monday through Friday, 8 to 4 p.m. during that test administrator window. And somebody from the Aussie team will be manning that phone during those times and will be able to hopefully direct your call or troubleshoot the issues with you. There is also our Aussie support tool through QuickBase. So if you need to submit any sort of documentation that includes student PII, you would want to do that through your Aussie support tool and your attachment documents. And you can also attach any sort of tickets or any technical issues through that portal as well. You can go to the next slide.
Before moving on, I do just want to address access to the OST, and I know that there have been a few people who've been requesting access to the OST QuickBase app, and we're working with another division here at Aussie to figure out the best way to get folks access to that. But the OST is, as Chelsea mentioned, where you would submit questions or concerns that include individual student PII, personally identifiable information. So things like their unique student identifiers and names and birth dates and things like that. All of that communication should go through the OST and not be emailed. And additionally, the OST is where LEA test coordinators will file incident reports as they come up throughout testing. So we know that getting access is a very time-sensitive issue, and we are working on it. So just wanted to note that and say that we appreciate your patience as we get those issues resolved. Hey, Chelsea, sorry, you're
Oh,
on
sorry.
mute.
Yeah. Did you
Yep.
want to take over preparing staff and
Yep,
students?
I
Or do you want
can.
to keep going? Okay.
I can go. Hello again, everyone. So just wanted to go through a few additional resources for Park and DC Science to help prepare staff and students for the administration. Test specification documents, things like the blueprints and the assessment unit structure, like how many units there are and the length of time, and all of that are available on our website at the links shown here for both ELA and math and as well as the DC Science. We also have practice tests available for each subject area on the DC Pearson support site. Those practice tests are both online and there are paper-based practice tests that you can print and use as well. A few resources and ways to get support in the setup process are noted on this slide here. So a couple of guides into using Pearson Access Next and TestNav 8, as well as the Park and DC Science manuals are noted here, and the infrastructure trial guide. And just a note about what an infrastructure trial is. It's basically a test run that some schools choose to conduct prior to assessment administration. And it's a way, it's run through the Pearson Access Next training site. And it's a way for folks to nail down their administration processes and gives students practice with logging in and understanding what they'll be seeing during actual administration. So it's basically like a test run to work out any kinks before actual administration. And so this guide gives step-by-step instructions about how to set up an infrastructure trial, and just noting that your school's technology coordinator is likely to be very heavily involved should you choose to administer an infrastructure trial. At this point, before we get into additional resources and supports, I'd like to just pause and ask if there are any additional questions. Please feel free to put them in the chat or to come off mute. Okay, well, let's keep on going. In terms of resources and supports, Chelsea did mention that there are a few trainings specific to Park and DC Science coming up. Just wanted to reshare the full training administration training schedule for this school year. We've had several workshops that a lot of folks have attended, and hopefully they were beneficial to you. But just noting that the recordings for those are posted on the Aussie website. If you have trouble finding any of them, please feel free to let us know. But you can see here any trainings that you may not have been able to attend, and can look on our website for the recordings. And then also this shows trainings that are upcoming. And we've referenced the technical assistance bookings with Aussie, and just noting that that is something that goes through the Microsoft booking system. And so it pulls our team's availability from our calendars. If you're having trouble finding a time that works for you for a discussion, please feel free to just email us and we can see if something can be moved around on our end and find a mutually agreeable time to provide that support to you. I will note that when going through bookings, it does give you an option to add specific notes or questions that you may have, which is helpful to our team if you fill out as you're signing up, so that we can be sure to be prepared to answer your questions and support you in the best way possible during that time that we have. Another few notes about support during administration. We've talked about the Aussie support tool. And the Asi Assessment Hotline phone, which is only open during test administration and for emergent test administration issues. So if you have something that is a little bit less time sensitive in terms of students are not actively testing in the moment, please use one of the other support vehicles. But the assessment hotline is for issues that are very urgent and need immediate resolution. Also noting the Assessment Administration customer support one-pager is posted to our website, and it has contact information for each of the programs of who is the best contact for support during administration. This is kind of page one of the document. There's a second page that has Aussie team members who are your points of contact for the various programs, and that particular page is getting updated and will be, the updated version should be posted to our website by early next week. Just noting that there are a few new faces on our team, so wanted to make sure that we're pointing you to the right folks to get you the support that you need if you do have questions. And just a note about future NGA meetings and additional communications. We do have 2 more meetings scheduled for what I guess could be considered the school year. I guess August is sort of getting into the next school year, but our next NGA meeting is June 9th, which will be after testing. And you can keep up with the assessments team and get information that you need throughout testing. We'll be continuing to send out our NGA bulletin that has critical information that you'll need. And just note that we will be sharing meeting agendas for NGA meetings prior to the meetings. But this slide does give you a little bit of an overview of our expected discussion topics during the next 2 NGA meetings. To receive the NGA bulletin, you can adjust your registration in eSchool Plus to one of the 4 roles that are noted here: LEA Assessment Manager, MSA Coordinator, Access for ELLs Coordinator, and Assessment POC. Those folks are automatically registered to receive the NJ Bulletin. If you are a non-public coordinator who does not have access to eSchool Plus, please send us an email at aussie.assessment@dc.gov and we can add you to the distribution list. I'm seeing a question in the chat about the recorded presentation, specifically the non-public presentation. I think that one did not yet make it onto the website, but we'll make sure to get that posted in the next day or so. But if you send us an email, we can send you a link to that recording as well. If
do they go on the test coordinator resources page somewhere?
I believe that it will be posted, but I don't think that it's just made it up there yet.
Okay, with I can't find the other ones. I might not be looking in the right. I may have tabbed the wrong place when I was looking before.
The recordings are in the test coordinator resources page, and you may have to scroll a bit to get to them, but they are linked under each individual program. So like the Park and DC Science ones are linked under that heading, and then the other assessment programs are linked. So it does take a bit of scrolling to get to that part of the page, but they are there. At this point, I'm going to pause again and ask if there are any additional questions that we can answer for you at this time. Okay, well, if there are no other questions, I would like to take a moment to share some assessment team news with all of our stakeholders. We have 2 team members who will be moving on to wonderful new adventures in their lives and wanting to acknowledge them at this point. Danielle Branson and Michael Craig actually are not leaving Aussie, but are going to other positions within Aussie. And we are very excited for their next chapters, and just want to give my appreciation for all of the work and teamwork that we've shared over the past however long I've been here. But really appreciate working with you all and the guidance and support that you've given to me as a new person and also to our stakeholders. I know you will be sorely missed, but you're not going far. I don't know if you want to say a few words.
Mike, do you want to say anything?
Oh, sure. So thank you, Stephanie. I just want to say it's been a pleasure working with you all, every stakeholder for the past 5 years I've been in Aussie. You guys have done tremendous work, and I'm just super excited to have collaborated with you all, and thank you again for the work that you've done for our students with significant cognitive disabilities, as well as our English learners. Just continue this work. It's not easy work, but you guys are definitely needed. And like Stephanie said, not leaving Aussie, I'll still be around. So email's not changing. If you need anything, just feel free to reach out.
And I want to echo Mike's thanks to the group. I'm like Mike, not going very far. I'm going to be transitioning to the Deputy Assistant Superintendent of K-12. So just up a floor. It has been a true pleasure working with all of you since 2016 on this really important work, and it's bittersweet, right? Going to a different lens, and we'll be working with you in a different context, but really appreciative for all of your partnership. And hoping that our paths will continue to cross in this important work, and we'll be working with your LEAs. And you'll know that Stephanie is going to be leading this team as the interim director of assessments. You are in very, very, very good hands. And of course, if you need anything from either of us, we are here for you, and we'll be supporting you.
Thank you, Danielle and Michael. And yes, I am taking control of the ship, so please have grace and patience. But we also have new team members coming on board, and I think you all are in very good hands. And we definitely wish Danielle and Michael the best in your new adventures in other parts of the Aussie building. With that, I just want to close by sharing again some links that may be helpful as you're preparing for administration. These links are to OSSE web pages, but also to pages for individual programs in getting information about trainings and ensuring that you have understanding of the next steps that you need to take for administration for each of those. With that, I will close 28 minutes early. Thank you all for your time and attention this afternoon.
I have one question.
Oh, yes, please.
Point of clarification.
Mhm.
For the access certification, in the report, it says that online 1 through 12, first year only required, and then it says annually recommended.
Mhm.
So which one is it?
Yep. So the test administrator training for access for the online access grades 1 through 12 is required for new test administrators, but recommended for folks who have served in that role previously. So it's only required for those test administrators who are new to the role.
Thank you.
Any other additional questions? All right. Well, again, thank you all for your time. Thank you for your attention. Thank you for all of the work that you've done and will continue to do over the next few months in support of assessment administration for spring 2022. Please do not hesitate to reach out to us if you do have questions or need support in any way. We are here to help, and we wish you all of the best in the next couple of months. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks.
Thanks, everyone.